currency.
The New World Order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to tonight's broadcast. Tonight I am joined by a very special guest, someone who I've mentioned on the broadcast many times, and I have referenced his work multiple times on air. I have referenced his book, The 13 Bloodlines of the Illuminati, which I recommend that everybody go out and purchase a copy of, because if you really want to know anything about what's going on with these bloodlines, these elitist families, what's going on behind the scenes, mind control, and more, then I suggest you read his book, Bloodlines of the Illuminati. I am pleased to bring to the airwaves for the listeners tonight none other than Mr. Fritz Springmeier. Fritz, welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you, and hello to all your listeners out there.
I know that many people know who you are, Fritz, and the hell that you've been through for having the courage to stand up and bring forth this information about these elitist bloodlines, mind control, and much more. You know, the reality of the situation as to what's going on. But some people might not know who you are. So let's take a few minutes. Go ahead and explain to them, Fritz, who you are and some of the things, the strife that you've been through in your life because you had the courage to stand up and talk about this stuff.
Okay, well, building upon what you already told the audience, and yes, I am an author. I wrote 7 books, a series of 7 books on the Illuminati, and 3 of those books dealt with the Illuminati's total mind control, which is a type of mind control way beyond the imagination of the common listener, probably about 1 million times more powerful than they're imagining if they're not familiar with my work. And then another one of the books, subjects of my books, was Bloodlines, and the current title of that, Federal Jack, is Bloodlines of the Illuminati. And by the way, any of these books that I mention, the listeners are able to purchase them or read about them, look at their covers, if they go to my blog, pentracks.com, pentracks.com. And that's important because these subjects, like you also mentioned, are so vast that just opening up the subject is like opening a Pandora's box. We get into information that's outside the worldview of the listener. They're having if they're going to assimilate this stuff, they have to be a truth lover that's willing to step outside their paradigm. Because as you use the term, the powers that shouldn't be, I hadn't heard that before. That's a nice term. The powers that shouldn't be. They have learned over the centuries to build our worldviews, and then they step outside of that and operate outside of that. So a lot of what they do is incredible because people have a certain expectation that's built into them by watching the 6 o'clock news and by having been indoctrinated in the schools and so forth. And to step outside of that is really difficult. But everybody that I have met, essentially everybody, has sometime in their lifetime encountered the powers that shouldn't be and has seen things that are not right, whether it was JFK's assassination or whether they were a farmer and they were trying to figure out why the prices were never right for the farmer so that they could never make a profit. Or maybe they're like one of my neighbors who had called, she had a company come in just to spray her fruit trees, and they used something that was even more expensive than what she had asked them. They used Agent Orange. And then when she called the Environmental Protection Agency, which is supposed to be our watchdog, when she tried to call the government to get some help, and she even had the lab proof of what they had sprayed, and her dog died and her kids came down with cancer, none of these people that were supposed to be protecting her did. They could care less. They laughed at her. And so maybe you've had some kind of experience like this, and those would be entry points for you to realize everything is not as it is pretends to be, that things are not what they look like. And maybe you're willing to look underneath the surface. And in that case, an excellent place to start would be my books, which are very extensive. I started exposing the Illuminati in 1990, and that's when I began writing my series of books. I did thousands and thousands of hours of research on them, investigating these people from every angle, from every source I could, and spent years gathering this information for the listener. The repercussions of that, as you said, were rather dramatic. At first, for several years, they just brought people into my life that observed what I was doing, watched. They surrounded me with people, and of course I had CIA-type people following my car all the time. And then in 1995 is when everything hit. They waited about 4 years, and then basically everything fell apart. I had everything coming at me from different directions. I survived that year and was again watched and monitored for a number of years until again the house came down on me in 2001 when the feds raided me, and then they managed to come up with some charges a couple years from then, which actually stuck in court, and I did 8 years in federal prison, and I'm still on probation. I've been out for a couple years. I'm still monitored. I'm still harassed, but I'm blessed. I feel blessed. God has preserved me, and I'm still going forward, and love life and encourage the listeners to get out there and enjoy life. Love life. That's what it's about. I'm all for life. The other kingdom, the kingdom of darkness, is about death. Christ came to give us life and life more abundantly, and that's what I'm about. That's a little bit about myself in a nutshell.
When you were in prison, Fritz, did you find people in prison itself were receptive to anything you had to say about the Illuminati? I mean, because I'm sure it came up once or twice, the subject. Was anybody in the jail itself receptive to what you had to say? Did the other inmates realize the reality of the situation?
Interesting question. I would say that because a lot of inmates have discovered firsthand how corrupt our judicial system is and how corrupt the government is, that about 90% of them, not all, there's some that are totally loyal to this government, but about 90% of them really question this government. They know that it's a dishonest government, and they're open to learn. They moved me around quite a bit. They didn't treat me like a common criminal. I was treated a lot worse by the feds when I was in federal prison, and they moved me around a lot. And as I was moved around to the different prisons, I almost always real soon bumped into inmates that had read my books, that had heard about me, because there are inmates that are studying these kind of things, and they were anxious and excited to meet me. And so, yes, there were people that I was able to visit with. There were actually some inmates that didn't know, hadn't read my material, but could sense that I was somebody that they could confide in. So I had people that had worked with the Illuminati, actually a good number of people that had worked with the Illuminati in various capacities that shared good information with me. So I was able to continue doing some amount of research while I was in there. It wasn't a very conducive place to writing because it was because a number of times I had my notes and the things I'd written thrown away by the guards. And you lived in such a controlled atmosphere that there wasn't. Your style was pretty cramped.
Yeah, I would guess so. I wonder if the guards were ever sent in there purposely to toss your cell and harass you and screw with you and throw away your notes on purpose to hinder your research while you were in there. Because I'm sure that the powers that shouldn't be, when they had you thrown in there, they obviously had to realize, well, this guy's pretty smart. He'll probably use this spare time to do more research and write more books. So I would guess that they probably had you targeted for a certain amount of harassment just because of who you are and what you say.
That's not beyond the realm of possibility. It's a little hard to know what motivates. For instance, I got that book on 9/11 that they were not able to publish the book in the United States. It was published in France that was exposing 9/11. And a guard came into my cell. He saw that book and he immediately threw it away. Actually, technically, they don't have a right to do that. They're supposed to have a reason to confiscate something and to give you a slip that they confiscated it. I didn't know where the book had gone. But, of course, inmates are the ones that are watching everything, and the inmates are the ones that do the work and empty the garbage. So one of the orderlies just dished the book out of the garbage and brought it back to me.
That's pretty cool. At least you had a certain amount of people, I guess you could say, looking out for your better interests while you were in there. That had to be pretty surreal, though, being in the prison system and having people coming up to you and tell you, I've read your books, Fritz Springmeier. Oh my God, you taught me about the Illuminati. That had to be pretty surreal to run into people that knew who you were.
Yeah, it was kind of trippy.
It's also good, too, right? People know who you are. They like you. They keep you safe.
Yeah, that's true.
Did you ever feel threatened? in prison, like your life? Not from per se like the other inmates, just, oh, I'm going to screw this guy up, but more so, did you ever feel that maybe there was somebody keeping an eye on you, and that if you stepped out of line too much in the wrong direction, that they might have something happen to you in prison, like an accidental fall down a set of stairs or something?
Well, see, I'll tell you something, Federal Jack. The people, both inmates and guards that I had to deal with while I was in prison, a lot of them are still in the prison system. A lot of them are still alive. And I'm still under probation. When they first released me, they let me out for 3 months, and then they just arrested me for no reason and threw me back into prison under investigation for 2.5 months. Nobody could find out why they threw me back into prison or how long they would keep me or what. In the event, they only kept me 2.5 months. But the point I'm making is I may have to go back and face the same people. And so a lot of these people, I won't mention any names, but let's just say I'll use the word some. Some of these people are not normal people. They're dangerous, and I don't particularly care to talk about any incidents or highlight any people or anything, because I still am potentially in a situation where I may deal with some of these people. It's the same reason why I don't like to talk about my case very much, is being under probation. I'm still under the power of the judge that sentenced me, who during trial, my case was placed into the federal law books as I set a new low standard for evidence, because there was no evidence used in my case. And the judge kept saying, as like he was saying some Buddhist mantra or something, circumstantial evidence can be used to prove anything. Which, if you think that through, that's like saying, well, I heard Santa Claus on the radio, I saw Santa Claus's picture in a book, therefore Santa Claus exists, circumstantial evidence. And that's all they used. And these people some of these people are exceptionally not nice, to make an understatement. And so I prefer not to discuss things like this, because it would be to my detriment in many ways.
Understood and completely respected. Moving on, let's get into the Illuminati themselves. I think a lot of times when people hear the term Illuminati, if they're not versed in this, if they haven't done any research, the average layman, if they hear the term Illuminati, a lot of times the first things, obviously that pop up in their head now, because of pop culture and because of the level of mind control on a mass level that everybody's exposed to, automatically they think of kooky conspiracy theorists, tinfoil hattery, craziness, and automatically if you say that, if you're trying to have a conversation with somebody and you keep saying they, and someone goes, well, who the hell are they? And you go, the Illuminati. And they look at you and they go, oh God, that's it. They just, as soon as you say the Illuminati, they turn you off. Who are the Illuminati, Fritz? To the people, if I was fresh, if I didn't know anything, and I came to you and I said, Fritz, who are the Illuminati? Please explain this to me so I understand, because I see so much conflicting stuff on YouTube, and I know there's a lot of disinfo out there put out there on purpose. You'd be the person I would, if I read your book and I said, okay, I've heard about you, I've seen some of your lectures, explain to me, who are the Illuminati?
Good question. I spent time trying to help quite a few members of the Illuminati escape from that organization. So of anybody, I know firsthand exactly what we're dealing with when we talk about the Illuminati. First, let me go back and mention that, the father of our country, George Washington, he's very respected. you can go back and read his writings. He warned the country about the Illuminati. So somebody as prestigious as President George Washington was warning the American people about the Illuminati. So it's not a pie-in-the-sky lunatic subject. A lot of very informed people have known about it. The word itself is something that they created. I didn't come up with the word. They came up with the word, and they've used it for hundreds of years. It means illuminated to divinity, and this is what the ancient rulers, like the pharaohs and the Caesars and the Babylonian kings, they believed that they were divine, that they were gods, and the rest of us were like ants. And so the Illuminati goes back to those ancient ruling bloodlines who have bifurcated, and they have hidden their lineages quite a bit. That's why I went back and I showed that our presidents are closely related, and our presidents are derived from these bloodlines. Here we thought that we had broken away from the aristocracy of Europe, but then if you look behind the scenes, you see that they quietly maintained their hold. They just fooled us into thinking that we had gotten away from the elite. So these are elite bloodlines that created our system and have run the system and used the system to control the world. And they have these bloodlines. It's not like they have come into power. They were the ones that have created the institutions of power. They're the ones that are the stockholders of the Federal Reserve. They're the ones that are behind Wall Street. They're the ones that are behind the corporations. They're the ones that are on the interlocking directorates of these corporations that everybody says pay the politician. Getting the words prostitute and politician mixed up. The politicians are their prostitutes, and of course, if you're higher up in the political arena, you're very likely one of the bloodlines anyway. So that's who the Illuminati are. They're powerful bloodlines. Another way of looking at them is to call them generational Satanists. Now, publicly, some of them have gone on record as saying they're Luciferian. That it's not Satan that they worship, it's Lucifer. And some of the people take issue with me calling them Satanists. But I worked with dealing with their mind control that they do to their own members. And I can tell you that once you learn the rituals, once you learn what they're really all about, there's no other way to describe them than to really accurately say, these people are satanic. Let's not sugarcoat it, I mean, somebody like Joseph Mengele, who was a Grand Master, if you study what he did in the concentration camps, if you want to call that Luciferian, call it whatever you want, but I would say that kind of evil can only be properly understood with the label satanic.
I find it interesting. It's funny that you say that. Albert Pike didn't like to be called a Satanist. I'm a Luciferian, as if the Luciferian, out of the two, they're both say they come from they both come from the same evil culture, right? We'll say then they try to break it down into two subcultures of that evil, where you have Luciferian and Satanist, and the Luciferians almost act like the Satanists. I'm doing air quotes when I say this because they're all the same, but they almost act like the Luciferians look at themselves like they're the upper crust of that group, and that almost like the Satanists are the lower of the two. It's amazing. When Pike talked about this, I was like, are you kidding me? I mean, not only is this guy twisted, but he's so twisted that he's arrogant. I mean, they even look at each other and separate each other by class in their own little groups. It's amazing.
Right. Yeah. they have deluded themselves into thinking that they have the light. You'll notice that people like Pike use the word light a lot. We're moving into light, we're getting enlightenment and so forth. But it's like up is down and light is darkness and darkness is light. They're so confused on everything. And then they have taken that confusion and they've externalized it into our culture. So our culture is all upside down too. The values of people are really twisted.
I've actually been focusing on that subject a lot lately. That's one of the things I talk about quite often, is how the morals and the values of this country are screwed up. In fact, I did quite a controversial segment on this a few weeks back. Probably one of the most quote unquote controversial things I've done in a while, right? I use because we're internet based. If someone lets it fly, it's not a big deal. You just keep going, So I used it for emphasis to prove a point about morals, and I was explaining how people get more upset about hearing the F word than they do about drones bombing some kid and blowing some kid into little pulpy pieces in some foreign country. And I went into detail like that, and with the bomb, with the description of what happens with a bomb, and then I went and I dropped the F-bomb. And I did it as a way to prove a point. And my point was proven because people emailed and whined that I had said the F-bomb. And nobody complained and mentioned anything I said about killing little kids and droning them with drones. And my whole point was this, to prove that people, it's amazing how backwards this country is. Because although, even 50 years ago, dropping the F-bomb would have been, taboo, people would have looked at what's going on with these drone strikes with complete and utter disgust. And I think that at least 50 years ago, the morals weren't as topsy-turvy in this country as they are now. And you know what I mean? People would have, it just wouldn't have been so, like Kevin Costner said in JFK, white is black, black is white. You have to go through the looking glass. That's why I named the name of my radio show Down the Rabbit Hole, because we literally are down the rabbit hole and everything is completely 180 degrees from what it should be.
Exactly. I agree with you. That's a big subject, just totally. And just astounding that they are convincing people that the worst thing on this planet are humans. I've been seeing recently quite a bit of propaganda that's being directed coming from the top, convincing people that humans are destroying this planet and we need to be eliminated. And you can actually bump into people, and if you say the right trigger words, it's like they're a parrot. They just start parroting what's been put into their minds and going off on this little spiel about how babies are horrible, people are horrible. Amazing.
It's the global,
that you can convince people to hate people.
Oh, it is, and it's like the green movement is good at that. This whole global warming garbage, which is just pushing the UN Agenda 21. But it's like this culture of death, and you're right. Through the mind control, mass media, music, and all this other stuff, they've literally gotten people to not only parrot what they say, because that's the programming aspect of it, being people's opinions being formulated for them and they don't even realize it. But there are people that actually buy into this, Fritz. I've actually had conversations with average everyday people, and they'll come out with things like, we're too overpopulated on this planet. I'm like, no, we're not. The Japanese proved 3 years ago there's more than enough land mass in Africa alone to feed the entire world right now. And actually more people than we have. So we're not overpopulated. Oh, yeah, man, you don't understand. I mean, look at New York City. Look how crowded New York City is. I'm like, that's because those people choose to live there. There's parts of this country that aren't even touched yet, where humans haven't been in 30 or 40 years. There's a lot of room we have. no, man. No, humans are screwing the planet up. Look at that hurricane that hit the Northeast. That hurricane is definite proof of global warming. No, what that hurricane is proof of is man can control the weather. That is what that hurricane is proof of. Okay? And that's a side issue, but if there is climate change, not global warming, but climate change, if the climate is changing and it fluctuates, why is it doing so much now? Well, because they're screwing with it. They're playing God, and it's based off of the beliefs of these same people that, we're talking about, these bloodlines that have actually not only convinced the masses, but there are some people that are attracted to people that aren't maybe born of the bloodline, but useful scumbags, as it were, to these people, and servants to these people. And they are like Cass Sunstein, people like him, one of Obama's czars. You get people like that are attracted to this type of, just killing other humans. It's amazing how people, the general public, will just suck this up and buy into it. And a lot of that has to do with the mind control. I don't think people realize the level of mind control that's put out there on the general populace every day. I mean, you see it, especially, it must be incredible for you, having all this knowledge that you have, to be able to look around and see things. You literally must be like Neo in the Matrix when he sees all the code, and at the end of the movie, he's looking at the hallway and he sees everything in green code. That literally must be your life 24 hours a day, Fritz.
Well, back in the early 90s, I got so far ahead of everybody in my understanding that it became very lonely, and I was reaching the point where it was hard to relate to anybody. And so what I had to do is put a lot of this information on the shelf and step back and start working to integrate myself back in, to be able just to relate with the common person. And that's what I did, because, like the Word of God says, we're not to be of the world, but we're in the world. In other words, I'm not going to join the mass of lemmings that are they think that they're moving forward with progress, and they're like, get out of the way, or you're going to be trampled on, because you got to run with the pack. This is progress. I'm not going to run off the cliff with everybody else who doesn't even know where this world's going. But on the other hand, I still need to be down at their level to where I can relate to them and understand what they're going through, and understand their view, and be basically at least pretend to be a normal person.
That's got to be rough. I mean, knowing the level of research that you've done. I mean, I've done a lot of research over the years, and I know others that have done lots of research as well. But I mean, Fritz, the level of knowledge that you have in your noodle is amazing. I mean, I know that I could sit and have a conversation about how, like I was having with you about Pike, the difference between Satanists and Luciferians, or at least what they think between the two of them. Not many people could understand that or be able to, extrapolate any information from that. So I really, it's amazing the knowledge that you have in your head. There's a few other things I wanted to pick your brain on. One of them actually, it goes back to something we were talking about a little earlier. The whole Satanist thing, the fact that these people do actually worship Satan. A lot of people have a hard time dealing with that. And I know people of many different religions, and when we get into a conversation about maybe someone that's a quote-unquote member of one of their religions, right, a high-ranking person, whatever, whether it be who pretends to be a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew, whatever, and usually they're politicians, and they'll say, oh, well, he's a good Christian, or he's a good Muslim, or he's a good Jew, and usually it'll be the Muslim, the Jew, or the Christian, whoever. Like if it's Christian, we're talking about. Sometimes we talk about everything, but a lot of times I'll bring up to bring the point home. I'll show something that it's a Christian that maybe they believe in, and I can show how this person's connected. Or if it's a Muslim person, I know same thing, with a Muslim. Or if it's a Jewish person, I could show someone, who's Jewish, and I could show how it's connected. It's like trying to open the door for them. And a lot of times they'll say to me, well, that goes against the basic tenets of their religion. They wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. And I find it's pretty difficult to. This is the biggest gap, or one of the biggest gaps I find, when you bring up the word Satanism, because it just sounds so grandiose, I think, and so what's the word? Like story-ish, like story, like not cartoonish, but something like you'd hear in a story or something. Not something you'd see in a horror movie. This isn't something that really goes on in real life. And people don't realize that they pretend, a lot of these politicians and stuff, pretend to be Christians or Muslims or Jews, but they're not. They're really, at the end of the day, Satanists. And they really do partake in human sacrifice and ceremonies that have human sacrifice as part of that ritual. And I find that really hard for people to accept. But you yourself know this is true, correct?
Yeah, the actual dynamics of what's going on are more complicated than that. If I can address them, I will try to.
Oh, please
right
take it away.
Since the time of the pharaohs, clear back in ancient Egypt, they had already discovered how to create multiple personality disorder. And the pharaoh, he had the job of ensuring that his son would carry out his wishes and perform like he wanted. So the pharaohs learned how to carry out mind control on their own children and how to create programmed multiples clear back there. That was one of the things that I was privileged to expose, was their secret mind control that they've been doing for thousands of years. So when they create a multiple personality person, they will take a few personalities that are going to operate in the real world, and they're going to try to give them the best front or the best persona that they can. And because they have the money, they have so much power in their own system, they'll take somebody and they'll make him into a world-renowned, a beloved politician. They'll make him into a world-renowned, beloved actor. They'll make him into a world-renowned, beloved comedian or Christian clergyman. In fact, your leading Christian clergymen are Illuminati. They're program multiples. And in my writings, I expose a number of these leading Christian ministers. Now, let's look at this front personality that's been created as a Christian. They actually are sincerely a Christian. They're dissociated from the garbage underneath them in their mind. They're dissociated because they're a multiple personality from the Luciferian, the pagan, the satanic parts. So when they act like a Christian, there is some genuine sincerity there. They really don't know fully what they're all about, although some of them do. Some of them have been compromised to the place where their front parts know enough to realize that they're fakes. But not all of them. So there is a certain level of sincerity with what you're seeing. And then as you go deeper into the mind, to these deeper altars, which are personalities, you will have some that are designed for pagan rituals. When you get involved with studying Wiccan rituals, you will hear from pagans, well, we're the original religion. We just love trees. We love nature. We love Mother Gaia, blah, blah. And again, you're seeing something that's portrayed as benevolent. But then underneath that, deeper than that, you'll come across Luciferian alters, personalities. And then when you get to the deepest part of the mind, that's when you actually get into parts of the mind which have been made into personalities, which are totally committed to Lucifer. That's why what you see is not what you get. There's a deeper level of understanding to these. But unfortunately, everything that we used to try to evaluate what a person's about has been obsolete our entire lives. In fact, what is amazing to me is our understanding of other people. Like, you look at men trying to understand women. Most men don't have a clue about women. You look at people trying to understand the politicians. They really have no clue as to what they're looking at. I had a lot of Christians this last election who were voting for particular candidates, presidential candidates, and I could see that they didn't have a clue as to what they're dealing with. And they're using outdated ways of things that are obsolete. The way that their theories about people, their ideas about what make people tick, are totally bogus, and they're totally ignorant of how little they know. I think that is maybe one of the first steps of intelligence, is realizing what we don't know.
I agree. The sign of a good researcher is someone who's able to admit that they don't know everything. You know, I say to my listeners all the time, you learn something new every day, and you should make that your goal to learn something new every day.
Right.
You know, even if it's the tiniest of things, doesn't matter if it's related to the conspiracy end either. I mean, you can take a lot of the lessons that you know, or your lessons from the things I say, or some of the guests say, and you could, you know, take that information and put that towards your personal life. And I've done it myself, and that's real change. That's how we stop this. Because one of the reasons they're able to get away with doing this vast level of mind control, and I know people don't think this is real, but it is. The reason why they're able to get away with it is because whether we realize it or not, we willingly partake in this. Now, it's sometimes it's been manipulated, and our opinions are formulated for us, again, through the mind control, but we part of this is we have to make our own choice to do this. I know that they believe in some in my research I've come across that I don't know if it's all of them or just some of them, but there's this, and I don't remember if it's a rule or some sort of tenet or whatever it is, but that they believe that they have to tell us what they're doing. It's some sort of karmic thing or something like that. So they have to, they can screw us, but they have to let us know that they're doing it, so that I guess we're being informed to a certain extent. And that's one of the reasons why they throw it in our face with some of the movies and television that we have. Amongst other things, I think a lot of it is trying to twist and formulate people's opinions and control society as a whole. Because that's what I see. I mean, I see people's opinions being formulated by what they see on the boob tube. Like you said, you'll have a conversation with somebody and buzzwords start coming out of their mouth. I mean, I've had conversations with my father, for instance, who back in the day, he used to watch Fox News. I'm proud to say he no longer tunes into it as much, and he does see through the BS. But I would have a conversation with him, and I would hear him almost regurgitate a talking point that I heard like Sean Hannity or somebody say. I had seen a clip of it online, and maybe he had a program the night before, said something outrageous, and maybe the next day or a day or two later I spoke to my father, and he would almost regurgitate this talking point, which I had heard been spewed so many times by, we'll say, Fox. And the same thing happened with other people in my family with CNN or MSNBC. And for someone like me, I can sit back and look and go, wow, it is amazing how they use the boob tube to control and formulate people's opinions. And it's this mass mind control. Mind control is so vast, it's amazing, ladies and gentlemen. Again, you're going to hear the term MK Ultra. That's an umbrella term for some experiments the government did, but this stuff goes way beyond that. And to be honest with you, I learned something new from Fritz today. You actually helped me just put something two and two together. When you were talking about the Pharaoh, I realized, wow, they've been doing it to their own kids since, like 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago. They've been doing this where that's one of the ways I know that they do pass on this sick, twisted desire and bloodlust is through this, what do you call it, trauma-based mind control and the things that they do to these kids. And then that's why they become psychopaths when they're old enough, and then they put them in positions of power, and they don't have problems killing and maiming and doing stuff either. And then they perpetuate it by doing the same things to their children, who then do it to their children. It's amazing how it just ended up getting passed down from the pharaohs. See, I didn't realize that's where it got its start. See, so you just helped me connect something.
Yeah, it's been insanity breeding insanity. History has been kind enough to give us at least a little picture of the insanity of some of the Roman Caesars. Just the story of Nero, for instance, fiddling while Rome burned. These people are sick people. The bloodlust, killing their own brothers and sisters and their own mothers, and they're psychopaths. But the thing of it is these elite bloodlines have never stepped down. People need to ask themselves, when did the powerful elite ever say, you know what, we're tired of running things, we're tired of running the show, we're tired of being worshipped as gods, we're just going to step down and let these serfs, these little slaves, these little people in their huts run the world. They never have. The only time that we thought that we began to get away from that was in the American Revolution. And that's why I went through and I showed in some genealogy work that I did, some genealogy charts that I put into the Bloodlines of the Illuminati book that show that our presidents are closely related, and our presidents are related. They're tied in with these elite bloodlines. So we didn't get away from it at all. We still, and on top of that, even let's say make the false assumption that our presidents weren't of these bloodlines, which there may have been a few that weren't. Even if they weren't, consider the fact that the money and that got them into power and all the people around them are still controlled. So at any rate, they're puppets. George Bush, the number 2, King George II, was a programmed multiple, and he had one of his personalities was Data Boy. It just was used for his handler's amusement. It memorized sports scores. But I had a book about all of the stupid things that George said. And for instance, at one point when he was being interviewed as president, it's obvious in his answer that he didn't have a clue what the executive, legislative, and judicial branch of government is. Now, I ask you, how can somebody be president and not know the difference between the judicial, legislative, and executive branch of government? Well, because he was a program multiple, and he happened to have an alter, a personality in the body that was handling the body at the time that was ignorant of those things. Other personalities would have been more savvy, but because he was a multiple, and he fluctuated from different personalities, he made all kinds of goofy statements while he was president.
How many of our politicians would you say are mind controlled or have multiple personalities?
In upper level government, a very, very high percentage. It wouldn't shock me if it's over half of them at the higher levels.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, and so you and what they do is they all spy on each other. everybody's set up to spy on each other, so nobody can break the circle. Nobody can get out of line. That's, the all-seeing eye is one of the Illuminati symbols, and it represents the fact that Lucifer or Satan has wanted to become godlike, where he can be omniscient and watch everything. Well, one of the ways that they can watch everything is they program all of these people to watch each other. So it's everybody snitching, everybody spying on each other. It's truly insanity.
It really is. And then when you try to explain this to people, because people naturally have questions, people that don't understand this, the questions they ask, if they're paying attention, like in fact, the other day I spoke at a college class. There's a professor at a university down here where I live who he has me come and speak at his class like once a year. And it's literally a class on conspiracy. And he comes at it from multiple ends. He shows the skeptic side. He shows a lot of the conspiracy itself, what's going on. But he understands this. He's not he doesn't bash it. He actually tries to get people interested in this stuff. He's very well researched himself, and he, if I remember correctly, he writes for Global Research. He writes articles for them from time to time. But while I was speaking in his class, one of the questions, and it was good, because I have to honestly say that these kids were all in their mid-20s and they were very engaged in it. I mean, they had stayed. The class ended at 10 o'clock and they had stayed till 20 after to finish hearing me talk. And they were they were all glued to their seats until I was done. They wouldn't get up. Not one of them left. And they were asking good questions. I tried to get questions from the audience, and one of the questions was, when you look into this, when you go down the rabbit hole, so to say, and you don't realize that there's more questions than there is answers. You don't. This conspiracy is so big, this thing is so vast, that when you research it, you realize, you start this to answer one question, and it leads you down a path where you find more questions instead of answers, and it leads you to have to do more research and more research. And she said, will you ever get to the bottom of this? And, I said to her, honestly, I don't think any of us will ever know everything there is to know right now. Perhaps if there's a shift in consciousness, and we do have this big change where we are everywhere all at once in our mind or whatever, we can understand things and we're connected. Maybe, I don't know, that's in the future. I really can't predict that type of thing. But when you research this, I said, yeah, you're right. You do go down the rabbit hole per se, and there you end up usually finding more questions. With answers come more questions, because when you find stuff out, it leads you to ask things. You look into it and you find out that they actually do sacrifice people. They actually do rituals and stuff like that, we'll say, right? And people will say, oh, well, no way. Come on, they can't do that. Well, you would, if you look at it that way, that doesn't just end there, right? Their curiosity doesn't end, because usually a question follows that. A question being something like, why would they do that? Or, I would never do something like that. Why would they do that? Well, there's another question, which leads you to down the point, of, well, these people are psychopaths. They are nothing like you or me or anybody else. You and I and most other people have love and compassion. And these people, it's literally been bred out of them, multi-generational. And like you said, that's a great term. Insanity breeding insanity. That should be a bumper sticker, Fritz.
I had the privilege, I guess that's maybe the word to use. There was a woman who had been kidnapped to be sacrificed, and she was taken out into the country by this high-level coven, and she was one of the few people that's been fortunate. She managed to escape. And then she had a friend who knew about my research, and the friend had her come and visit with me about her experiences. The point being is, I've met someone who was faced being sacrificed and escaped. I also got to interview a Christian man who accidentally on Halloween came across out in the country it was a satanic coven that was getting ready to sacrifice a little boy and a little girl that had been kidnapped the day before. And he called the police. Fortunately, the police were close to that area of the country. They got there, and when the police came up, they told him, well, you called us. We're going to deputize you. You lead us up there. So as they started to go up the hill, the coven leader tried to speed up the sacrifice and raised the anathema to kill the boy, and the police ended up shooting him before he could stick the knife into the child's heart. And then the next coven leader tried to finish the sacrifice and had to be shot too. So, these things happen. They're happening all around, but our controlled media doesn't give them the coverage that they should get. I've met with many people that have bumped into these kind of things. People that were out in the country and came across rituals at night and barely got away with their lives. Were chased and barely got away with their lives. Another man whose daughter was killed by a Satanist, just on and on. So these things do happen. Unfortunately, they're pretty well covered up. For instance, a policeman that I knew was telling me about how one man had taken photographs with he had lens where he could stand back, telescopic lens, where he could take picture of a sacrifice. And when he gave them to the local police, the state police came real quickly and covered it all up. And end of that whole thing. So anyway.
Well, that leads me to another question. A lot of people have, and this is actually just from things I've noticed on my own, but also I've noticed that these are, when you discuss this with other people, like I said, eventually these questions get thrown at you. Another one would be, well, are these cases connected? So do you think this coven where they shot the two, the CO and the XO, as it were, they shot the first and second in command. Do you think that coven was connected to, maybe another coven where maybe they were members of law enforcement or judiciary or politicians, perhaps? Because I know a lot. It's very surprising who you come across when you look into the satanic worship and these covens and stuff. You come to find out that there's a lot of I guess famous people. I mean, everybody from sports players and movie stars to politicians, lawyers, doctors, and I find that it really is interconnected. But what say you? I mean, you're somewhat of an expert on this. Well, I would say more than somewhat of an expert. You are an expert on this. You are one of the foremost experts.
As that expression goes, it's a small world. And so many things are interconnected on various levels. And so, yeah, there's a vast interconnection. When I started working with people that had been in the Illuminati, they broke down for me the Illuminati structure. It's 3-tiered. And the first level is called the anarchy level. And the anarchy level consists of many different lodges, many different covens of many different types, pagan covens, witchcraft covens of different types, Alexandria, Gardner, different types of pagan religions. And they're all made to look like they're not related at all. And so that's the anarchy level, and it looks just like chaos. But you can get order out of that chaos because they will oftentimes have one person within each of these covens who's been secretly delegated to send the information back to headquarters in Europe, detailing the activities of the coven, how many people they are. And so there's a control mechanism there, but it's very secret. And there are many interconnections in other ways. Just to give you an example, we think of the Knights of Columbus as a Catholic fraternal organization, while the Freemasons tend to be more of a Protestant type fraternal organization. And for years, there's been this supposed war between the Catholic Church and the Masons. So it would surprise people to find out that a lot of these different fraternal organizations go to the same company to get their little badges and the little pins and all their awards and all. The same company is making it for all of these people. And not only that, but the Knights of Columbus and the Freemasons have high-level meetings where their leaders meet together and coordinate their activities. So what looks like anarchy, like unrelated organizations or organizations that are in competition or opposed to each other, are actually at the top working together.
Yeah, and people have no idea. It's like the best way to put it is like Ventura said about how politics is like professional wrestling. And they go out in the mat and they fight out in front of the cameras. They beat the crap out of each other, and they go back in the locker room. They're having beers. They go to each other's kids' birthday parties and stuff. A good example is the Bush family and the Clintons. I remember back in the day, they were always going back and forth and taking swipes at each other. Well, Bill Clinton is actually considered to be another son by HW. He's considered to be like an extended part of the family. So and that's the reality of the situation. I mean, now you see them palling around together all the time, but back in the day, they used to play it off like they were going against each other and they hated each other and back and forth. And a lot of that is so that people, the general public, buys into it. And you see that a lot with the Republican versus Democrat, the left versus the right. Yeah. People buy into that, and it's a complete distraction. And it's amazing the game of chess that's being played with us. It really is.
It's a magic trick. They distract you over here with their BS, and then the reality is being done somewhere else. So, after the CIA had said that Osama bin Laden was a terrorist, you still have the Bush family, the Bushes, going over and having secret meetings with them. And the Osama bin Laden family, which was large, he had brothers and family members over here in this country when 9/11 broke out. Some of his family members were quietly allowed to leave the country because it wasn't all that wise for them to hang around. But there's another example, Osama bin Laden, who they made into a boogeyman, who we created him, and he was best of friends with the Bush family. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, Hollywood writers would pay, buku bucks to have somebody write them or deliver them a story like this, and yet this is actually reality. I'm glad you brought up terrorism and bin Laden and stuff, because I've often had a theory about a lot of these guys that are terrorists, these quote unquote terror masterminds like bin Laden and these other people. I think a lot of them are mind control victims themselves, and that they are like puppets, and that they are controlled and used for to play out their part of the bad guy terrorist that's going to come get you and blow you up and kill everyone. For instance, if you look at 9/11, people will say, oh, well, those terrorists, they attacked the pilots, they took over everything, and then they flew the buildings flew the planes into the buildings, and they did it, they were really hell-bent on it. That was their belief and everything. Well, what if they could have, there's multiple scenarios. They could have, I think that obviously the planes were probably remotely controlled, but what if those guys themselves didn't willingly, go onto that plane? What if, in this indoctrination to what they call quote-unquote radical Islam, what if behind the scenes there was more mind control going on? I mean, I know it sounds like a crazy possibility, but if the CIA is involved, and you know that they create a lot of these things, right, and Mossad too, what's to say that they don't use mind control techniques to create these suicide bombers?
Oh, I'm going to build upon what you were saying. And over the last 20 years, I've been watching, and the Mossad is involved in using the trauma-based total mind control that the Illuminati does. And interestingly, you'll notice that every time Israel needs the Palestinians to do some act of terrorism so that the Israelis will get some sympathy and can push through some kind of program, there will be some Palestinian terrorists blow up a school bus of children. Well, let me tell you that those Palestinians are under Mossad mind control. And it's so convenient for the Mossad that whenever Israel needs something like that, it always happens. But why are the Palestinians so obliging to help the Israelis out that way? You know what I mean? And you never see a military installation or anything like that blown up. It's always innocent people, which is totally counterproductive to the goals of the Palestinians. So yeah, you're on the right track. These are scripts, and it's like one Illuminati Grand Master told his daughter, who I was helping to get out of the Illuminati. He had told her that the whole world's a stage. That they're just carrying out these detailed scripts, and they're plots within subplots. They're very complicated, but they're going in a particular direction. And sometimes what would be more helpful for people is don't look at all the details. And the analogy to this is let's say somebody came and they were having personal problems in their life, and they started telling you all the details of the interaction between them and their wife, or them and their child, whatever the problem is. The details may be contradictory, but look at the process. Look at the process of what's been going on. Don't get distracted by all the contradictory details. Look at the process, and the overarching process, and you'll see the overarching agenda, and you'll get a better understanding of what the script is.
Yeah, and it's like we live in a movie, and what we see as movies and television are just distractions within that movie that we actually live. I mean, if people have seen, for people to understand what I mean, if you go and watch a movie, right, you sit down, you watch something on your television, in the movie, the character might be watching television at some point, or watching a video, or using a computer, right? Well,
right.
It's the same thing we're doing when, we're literally the character using a television or a computer or something, except we live in this movie that's, I don't even know what to call it, which it's amazing how they blur the lines, the level of control, the level of things they do to people, even through media. Let's look at Big Brother, these reality TV shows, right? It started off with this show Big Brother. Interesting choice of names for a reality TV show where they have cameras everywhere. And, back then, when that show first came out, Fritz, it was very kind of taboo. People were like, oh my God, wow, they're going to have cameras all over watching everything you do? That's crazy. And a lot of people were like, you see, they're conditioning you for people to get used to it. Now, fast forward, I think the show's been on I don't know, 10 years or 13 years or something like that now, somewhere around there. And we'll say more than 10 years. So now the show has been on for a long period of time, and in that period of time, you've created this, I'm doing air quotes again, genre of television which obviously it was manipulated and created by people that knew what they were doing to begin with. But this reality television now has everybody used to having cameras all over the place and being watched. And what do you see sprouting up everywhere? On street corners, light poles. I mean, out in the middle of the countryside. I was out in the middle of Nowheresville a couple weeks ago, literally where you could drive up to a stop sign and you didn't have to look right or left because you knew there were no cars coming,
Right.
And there were cameras on light poles and cameras
Wow.
at intersection, on the like if there was a traffic light, there'd be a camera hanging from the light. And my wife was like, "Why do they need that out here in the middle of nowhere? There's nothing but farms out here." I mean, we were literally probably 30 miles from any city. We were out in the middle of nowhere. And she was like, "Why do they need cameras out here? Who's putting that up? Who's watching that?" Of course, no humans watching it. There might be a bank of television monitors where someone checks it out, for a period of time, but that's all being recorded and databased. Well, I mean,
Right.
Why do you need that? Why do you have to have cameras everywhere? Because we're now living in this reality television show. We've been conditioned to have cameras up our butts and live in this police state, and it's okay.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
it's been done through this mind control, this mass level of mind control. Go on, I didn't mean to cut you off, Fritz.
Oh no, I'm enjoying listening to what you're saying. You're right on. And back in 1979, I got the opportunity to travel to Libya, and some of these countries that our news media makes out to be dictatorships where there's no freedom, because their society was structured so entirely different than America. It was not a police state like United States. If you travel to some of these other countries, you'll actually feel freer because you're not being watched all the time, and there isn't a police car on every block. Literally, there's sometimes I drive through Portland, Oregon, and there it is amazing. There is a police car on every block. And I was driving with someone, and I said, "Watch this. We're going to turn off here." And I bet that we encounter a police car every block for the next 10 blocks. We did. And my question is, why do we need that many police? But then you go to some of these countries where they don't have that, and you actually begin to, for the first time, feel free. But Americans who have grown up with this police state atmosphere, they don't know what it used to be like. They think that the police have always been like this.
It's crazy. I'm old enough to remember when cops actually still had uniforms that more resembled, a postal worker's uniform with the striped pants. And, yeah, they had, shirts, but it was a button-up shirt, with a tie. I don't see them dressed like that anymore. Now they all dress like, Darth Vader in SWAT outfits, and they have tactical gear and bulletproof vests on, things that say sheriff across the front or police. When I was a kid, they were more friendly. The cop in town knew you. I got caught doing things when I was a kid I shouldn't have been doing. And the one detective, half the town cops knew my mom because she worked for the town at one point. And when they caught me, I was lighting fires in the garbage cans in the park. That was a couple miles, about half a mile behind my house. And long story short, the detective caught me, or somebody caught me, and they called the cops. The detective came over, picked me up, and he said, "I'm not going to arrest you. I'm going to take you home." And, I actually begged him to take me to jail because at that time, you were, you know what I mean? That the prospect of them taking you to the police station wasn't as horrifying as going home and having your mother put her boot up inside your butt. And now it's topsy-turvy. But instead, he took me home. He didn't, wreck my life and take me to jail. He didn't he didn't mace me or tase me or shoot me or anything like that. He took me home. He did what he was supposed to do. And he took me home, and he told my mother what I did, and he let my mother deal with me, which my mother, swiftly dealt out the appropriate punishment for at least what she felt was appropriate. And I'll tell you what, here I am in my late 30s, and I still remember this, and I was only, maybe 13 years old, 14 years old, and here I remember the lesson. So obviously she did something right. But now the police don't do that anymore. It's amazing that now you see kids getting tased and beaten and pepper sprayed and maced, shot. It's like everything is just, I always say this, I woke up one day, walked outside, and it was Bizarro world. If you've ever,
Right.
like Superman, Bizarro Superman, that's where we're in Bizarro world, Fritz. It's like, what?
Yeah.
What the hell happened? Everything is reversed.
Yeah, they'll have someone on the ground in handcuffs and tasing them. I saw something almost that bad the other day, and it was pretty upsetting. It was hard for me to not get involved because you had a whole bunch of police that were, quite frankly, they were bullies. And this guy was compliant. He was down on the ground, and they weren't going to give up. They were going to get their jollies. And that's where we've come to. And the younger generation, when I talk to them, a lot of them don't realize that that's not the way it was 30, 40 years ago, that the cop in your small town was there to help people. And even in the United Kingdom, when I went over to England, I was surprised that the bobbies, the policemen in downtown London were walking around without guns. And I was like, how can you guys do this? Well, because they weren't creating this atmosphere of people were respecting them and they were respecting people, and it was a whole different atmosphere.
Yeah, the whole world, the whole atmosphere, the environment, everything is just completely topsy-turvy. And it really accelerated over the past 10 years. Like 9/11 was a big key point. And I know it was not only a false flag event. I've looked into some of the occult aspects of it, and, the understanding what the powers that shouldn't be believe in. And again, ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't matter whether you believe in this or not. I know a lot of good people that are like the devout, whatever, whether it be Christian or they're very faithful to whatever religion, Judaism, Islam, and up to a certain extent, they'll research this, and then when it gets to some of the crazier stuff that the elitists or the powers that shouldn't be believe in, they stop and they say, well, that kind of conflicts with my religious beliefs. Well, I don't expect anybody to believe what these people believe in. I don't know if everything that they believe in is true or not. I've researched a lot of it, but I mean, it would take me probably an entire lifetime to answer all the questions, and I would probably still end up coming up with more questions than answers. But what I do know is you have to understand what these people believe in if you want any hope of even trying to get through this and change things for the better. So I don't expect some people to believe it, because a lot of it, I'm sure you've run into that, Fritz, where speaking at the Prophecy Club back in the day, I'm sure once in a while some of the things that you talked about, people would, look at you like, oh, come on, now you're starting to push the fringe a little bit. Now you're starting to really make me, do I want to believe you? Are you kooky? And it's like, look, I'm trying to make you understand that these people this is what they believe. And, whatever religion people subscribe to, if you want to have a choice of beating the Illuminati, the Satanists, whatever you want to call them, if we want to beat them, we have to understand the things that they believe in, so that we can try that help us figure out why they do what they do. Because otherwise, people don't understand why they do what they do. Like, well, why would they kill? Why would they don't they have a problem sleeping at night, killing over 3,000 people on 9/11, or all the people that died in the invasion of Iraq? All the civilians over there and the people that continue to die, or Afghanistan, or how. If all this is part of some vast conspiracy, how could they do that? I don't understand that. Don't they lose sleep at night? And it's like, no. And in order to understand on a deeper level why they don't lose sleep at night, I can't just say to someone, well, they're psychos. Because I mean, that's a canned answer. You know what I mean? You have to understand it on a deeper level why these people are the way they are and what they believe in. And it's not just their beliefs. Fritz, you brought up a great point. Again, the trauma-based mind control that the kids of the bloodlines are put through from the time they're children, so that by the time they're adults, they now will perpetuate that. They're in line. B, they're going to perpetuate that to their children, and then they'll just keep doing it. But also, you brought up a good point, how they are also mind-controlled themselves, and a lot of these politicians are controlled, which I have to ask this question before I forget. How many of the world's leaders, like the bad guys over the years, do you think have been mind-controlled to be used as a public pawn to get the public to buy into the us versus them mentality while this whole agenda goes on behind the scenes?
Well, when we come to the European leaders, it's pretty comprehensive. When we look at China has a lot of high-level Communist Committee members and other leaders within the Chinese apparatus that are also Illuminati. So within China, the English-speaking world, like America, Australia, Canada, Europe, these countries, it's very extensive. With your third world countries, they have a lot of other methods for controlling people in third world countries, the leaders. A lot of those leaders can be bribed, bought off, blackmailed. And then if we go to Russia too has been controlled by certain families, and so Russia also has a lot of program multiples within its leadership. But then one thing too is the Illuminati bloodlines. As I worked around them and watched them, they use the mob, they use controlled crime groups to do a lot of their dirty work. So like here in Oregon, the Illuminati were using the Mexican mafia, or like the Lee family, which is a Chinese Illuminati family that was in Hawaii, was interacting with the Italian mafia and other crime groups in Hawaii. So they over the years there's been a close connection with organized crime and the Illuminati. Some of the Italian mafia families, and quite a few of the Jewish Mishpucha mafia families are Illuminati. So there's a crossover there.
Yeah. I've often said to my listeners that if they see something, like Israel versus Palestine, or they see Israel doing whatever, and they go, oh, well, the Jews. And I've said often, look, you have to understand it. They're not Jews. These people are fake. They're really Satanists. They're these illuminated ones, these Illuminati. And people will argue, well, how is this person controlled, or how is this person controlled? Because it's all bloodlines, or And if it's not a direct, if it's not like a direct right off the bloodline type thing, as in like George H.W. with his son, where it's publicly known that he's of the bloodline, you have a lot of these people on the side are birthed out of the bloodline, like Bill Clinton. He's a Rockefeller. A lot of people have no idea that he, by blood, he actually comes from the Rockefeller clan. But it comes from one of his. I think it was his mother ended up. She worked at the Rockefellers, and she ended up getting impregnated by one of them. And and this happens quite often. And then they use those kids from these different affairs in positions of power too. And of course, I'm sure they put them through the same mind control techniques from the time they're children. I've seen evidence that people have presented to me, because mind control is something I've researched for a very long time. I've seen evidence that Bill Clinton was mind controlled. You can even see it in some videos where he's just sitting there with this like dazed, glass-eyed look. You know what I'm talking about, Fritz?
Right. And not only was he subjected to their trauma-based mind control, but he was also slated. He was one of them that they identified as presidential material, and he was groomed for that job from the time he was a small boy. They have some very sophisticated methods for identifying the talents of young people, and then they decide what path they're going to put that child on, and then they start grooming them and developing them for that particular position. So he was groomed from early on to be president.
Wow. At like what age are they picked? In their 20s, or do they wait till they're in their 30s? Do they scout them real young? How do they do it?
I think, I'm trying to remember in his particular case, I think it was like about 8 years old that they had decided that this guy was presidential material. He thought that the idea was ludicrous. When they started grooming him that direction, he himself didn't see himself as presidential material, but over the years, as they continued to see how he developed and steer him in that direction, it became more and more feasible that, I maybe I could be president. But when they first started grooming him, that the idea to him was a big joke. That's what an eyewitness told me.
That leads me to the next question of how many presidents have been groomed through this mind control process now. I mean, you see a lot of them, like you mentioned Bush Jr., we just talked about Clinton. We can get into Obama in a second, because I think there are times he even looks like he's a puppet and he's being controlled. Sometimes you could see the look in his eyes, and it's almost like there are different Obamas. There's a couple different personalities he's got. But how far back does this grooming mind control of the politicians go? I mean, was Kennedy? Did they try to do the same thing to Kennedy, or was he the example of why they had to have this mind controlled presidency process? Because you can't have a president that you think you can control with sex and drugs and other things, and then he actually stands up and tries to be president, and then you have to blow his brains out in a public venue. It's much easier just to have a mind controlled goon in there right from the get go that you've molded over 30 or 40 years. And I would have only thought that maybe they picked him in his 20s, but it's amazing they started looking at him that even that young of an age. But that does concur with the things that they do. Anyway, how long would you say this has been going on, where they've been grooming these mind-controlled presidents for?
My understanding of that is pretty limited. Speaking about John F. Kennedy, his brother Joe Jr., was actually the one that had been initially slated to become president. And Joe was on a plane in World War II that blew up and over in Europe, over the English Channel. And so his father wanted one of his sons to be president and went ahead, and drafted John F. Kennedy but originally he wasn't slated. And I've wondered if that may be part of the reason why JFK ended up having a mind of his own. He definitely, like you said, he decided to be president. He thought he was president, and he started unraveling and undoing everything that they had on their agenda. Across the board, everything that they had that they wanted done, he was dismantling it. And so it's not surprising that the whole system collaborated to shoot him. And it's really surprising that he was able to break free like that. And I don't know the whole dynamics of how he was able to be his own person, because I think that he for sure had to have had some of the standard mind control, but his front personalities must have been strong enough that they decided, you know what, I'm president, and this isn't. I don't like what the puppet masters want to do, and the people love me, and I'm just going to move forward and be president. So yeah, that brings up an issue too, that remember we're dealing with program multiples, and their front personalities will have vastly different beliefs and thinking than the deeper personalities, which is one of the reasons why they come across so sincere. That's one of the ways why the deception works so well, is because let's say you're a student of body language and you're like, well, he doesn't look to me like he's lying. Well, no, that front personality really believes the stuff that he's saying. It's the other personalities that are more dangerous.
Do you think the founding fathers practice this type of grooming on their own children? I mean, I know that they obviously like you said, this goes back to the days of the pharaohs in Egypt. So obviously that's long before the founding of this country. So do you think? And these guys had access to this knowledge. And I know George Washington wrote how the Illuminati was trying to take over. He even said the Illuminati in New York, and he called them the Jacobites, if I remember correctly, in his diaries. But he said that not all Masons were bad, but the Freemasons were being infiltrated by these people, and that they were working against America's interests. And some people say that Washington was in on this agenda. I haven't seen enough evidence to say that he was in on the agenda. I mean, in his own diaries, he talks about what what he knows to be going on, and maybe he didn't say that he was part of it either when he wrote it. The way he wrote it, it didn't come across like he was part of it, like some of these people do. It came across like he was an enlightened individual and then saw what was going on. But do you think that at some point, maybe, going back as far as the founders, that they started to use this own type of grooming process on their kids? Because there were, going back there, if you look right into the beginning of the first presidencies, we'll say like the first, not really Washington, but like Adams. Later on, there were members of his family that ended up being in public office and being politicians and ended up being in power of the country. So it makes one wonder, did these guys, did John Adams practice the same type of mind control techniques on his kids and his family line as these Illuminati do now? I just wonder how, we've been lied to so much. It just opens the door to so many things. I wonder how far back this practice of grooming your kids or grooming certain individuals from the time they're young to be the next quote unquote president. I wonder how far back it goes.
Well, within this country, I think bringing up John Adams was astute on your part, because his family had been generational satanic druid family before the family immigrated to America. And you will see, of course, his son became president after him, sort of one of these things like we had George H.W. Bush, and then we had George W. Bush. So, his son, and then you'll see that other members of the family continued to be prominent. The family didn't just have a moment in history, but it had some continuity there of power. So that would be one of the families that it looks to me like was doing the type of generational mind control that we're talking about. Bear in mind that the way it was being conducted back then was a lot more primitive. That was one of the reasons why they did so much trauma work in the Nazi concentration camps, was to bring their mind control, the trauma-based mind control, up to a more scientific, detailed level. And Mengele was one of their star programmers that they brought over to the United States to raise the level of the programming over here in the United States. So it was being done back then, but it was not as powerful. I guess you could say back then they were using a musket instead of an M60 machine gun, Of course, if you're killed with a musket, you're just as dead as if you got shot with an M60 machine gun. So it's relative, but it was more primitive back then. And as far as giving a detailed breakdown of which presidents were subjected to this and which weren't, that I couldn't do. I can say this, that the powers that be have always gotten their man in as president. The whole process of selecting a president is fraught with all kinds of room for manipulation, and through various means of manipulation, it hasn't been the same method every election, but from the very beginning, the elite have been pulling strings to get their person into power as president. And George Washington, I agree with you. He appears to me, from what I can make out, is that yes, he was from prominent bloodlines, but he was somebody who was so radically different from most of your politicians. Most people get drunk with power, and Washington was one of the few people who was capable of not getting drunk with power. And while he went along with the powers that be back then, I think that he was the window dressing to start this country so that people would feel relaxed and that they would believe that, okay, we have truly had a revolution here. We're moving forward. Here's a man who could have been king, but he turned it down and only reluctantly became president because he realized that would be best for the country. So I see him as somebody that cooperated with them, but was not intimately within the organization.
Yeah, see, I don't think he was playing ball, I guess you could say. And a lot of people, I think that's one of the reasons, I wonder if that's one of the reasons they made that statue of him in the Baphomet pose as kind of a almost like, I guess, dirtying his image, because he wouldn't have been part of that, you know what I mean? So that would have that would have disgusted him. I mean, Washington didn't even like swearing.
Right.
He was an interesting individual, to say the least. And I'm not saying the guy didn't have his faults, but it's just he was an interesting individual. And if he wasn't part of the, if he wasn't playing ball per se, I wonder if that's one of the reasons why they made that statue of him in the Baphomet pose. Almost like a middle finger to his memory, or an insult to him, because they have their little monuments all over the place, you know. So
it's very interesting observation on your part.
Once you start to understand the arrogance and the level that these people have, the things that they do. I mean, he's not around anymore, right? He's long since dead, and he didn't erect that thing to himself. That was erected later on, and by that time, these people, the powers that shouldn't be, were really heavily in control of things here, and they were putting up their little monuments all over the place. So, I mean, it's not too far out of the bounds to think that.
Well, speaking on the subject of monuments, this is something I've never talked about publicly, and I'm just going to throw it out for the listeners. People will respond differently to this, but I went to Dealey Plaza where JFK was killed, and then they have a memorial to JFK about a block away. Well, the Washington Monument is quite an obelisk. The Jefferson Monument is very monumental, and the Lincoln Memorial, I mean, that's incredible. You've got this pantheon, this Greek temple with this huge statue of Lincoln. So all of these are incredible monuments to these famous presidents that we had. But then you go to the monument that they built for John F. Kennedy, and I don't know if any of the listeners have been there, but what is it? But it's a concrete wall. It looks like a dirty concrete wall that you would find in any ghetto, any hood. And it's like, this is what they built him? Is they built a concrete wall? I mean, what a what a joke. The man was loved. I remember the day he was shot. He was such a popular president, and then they made a dirty concrete wall for him. Whoop-de-doo, to me, that right there shows their total disdain for him.
Yeah, they did not like Jack. They didn't. And for whatever, I mean, the guy wasn't perfect. He did some things that I didn't agree with. And perhaps that was, as you pointed out, that he was probably exposed to some level of mind control, and perhaps those were different altars at whatever at whatever point that they used to carry out a certain agenda. Because I mean, there are literally altars for people that don't understand. By the way, when you hear multiple personalities, that's not something that naturally happens. Okay, that means that person has been put through trauma-based mind control.
Exactly.
You don't experience that naturally. Your body, the way that your body deals with trauma by compartmentalizing it, the way your brain does that's natural. But what they're doing is they're taking that natural process and then they're actually manipulating it and doing things with it to create different personalities that they can go in and then access each personality and program them to do certain things. And whether they program them through hypnosis or whatever, it's really disgusting, because they figured out literally how your brain deals with certain issues, how, like traumatic events, how our brains deal with it so that we can continue to function instead of turning into a blubbering pile of goo on the ground, and just, drooling on ourselves. And they've taken that. It's almost like a defense mechanism that our brain has, and they've taken that and they've completely perverted it, Fritz. It's disgusting.
So well said. I congratulate you on breaking that down to the listeners. You did such a wonderful job there. You are dead on, and I loved every word, the way you put that together. That was a good description of what goes on.
It's incredible, and I only have this understanding because I've taken the time to do the research, and a lot of the stuff that actually you've come forward with has helped me understand a lot of this. Your book, How to Make an Undetectable Mind Control Slave, I think is the title, correct?
That's pretty close. The full title is The Illuminati Formula Used to Create a Total Mind-Controlled Slave. And I call it the formula book for short. At some point, I need to just make the title the formula book, and it's long titled the subtitle. But I thought about it, and I said to myself, I don't want to subtract one little part of the description. It's totally undetectable. It totally controls the person. It's Illuminati. I didn't want to take any part of this description out, so I made this long title. I know, I was marching to my own drummer there.
It is kind of a long title, but the book's definitely worth getting a copy. Are there still copies, by the way, of it in print that people can purchase a physical copy of? Yes,
I have the formula book and its sequel, Deeper Insights, available for people if they go to my blog. My blog is pentracks.com, pentracks.com, pentracks.com. Pen like you're writing with a pen, tracks like a rabbit leaves tracks in the snow, pentracks.com. And my books are a number of them are there available for people to purchase.
And I urge everyone to purchase all of Fritz's books, whatever that's in print that you can get your hands on. I have Bloodlines of the Illuminati. When I get a little extra money, I'm going to purchase the other ones because, and look, ladies and gentlemen, I all the time say myself that you should get books. I often have many different authors who I've read and who I respect on the broadcast, and I always urge you to get their books. And what do I say? Ebooks are great, and I'm sure you can find ebook copies of Fritz's books out there, but you know what happens if the electricity goes out? Your ebook doesn't work. If there's a solar flare, your ebook doesn't work. If there's an EMP blast, your ebook doesn't work. But guess what does work? That paperback copy that you have in your hands that you can flip through and sit there with a flashlight or a candle or go out in the sunlight. Ooh, there's an interesting concept, actually seeing the sun once in a while. So you can still physically read. There's a reason why books have lasted thousands and thousands of years, and the PDF file's only been around for, maybe 10, 20 years at the most. Okay, that type of electronic information can be perverted, twisted, changed. People can edit things, revise things, but it's really hard to edit or revise a book when it's printed and sitting on someone's shelf. So go to Fritz's site and purchase his books. Fritz, one more time, throw out your website.
Okay, it's pentracks.com, pentracks.com. And the books that are up there on the internet, by the way, those are pirated versions that they're giving away free. Some of the people that have put my books up for free on the internet for years actually don't even like me. And so you can see where they're coming from. Some of the books at times have had the text changed on them, and so there, I've had people confront me about things in my books, and then I said, well, where are you getting that? And it turns out that they had gotten it from the internet version instead of the version that I had put out. So, if you want the actual book, those can be obtained from my website there that I gave. And the other thing too is if you like what I'm doing, it helps support me too, because I don't make any money off of pirated versions that are given away free. And if you know that on the average, it generally takes me about a year of hard work to produce one of these books, that you realize that as the scriptures say, the word says the worker is worthy of his hire. Certainly, someone who risks their life and suffers the kind of things that I've suffered is worthy to be recompensed for the hard work. So anyway, I leave that thought with you.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up a banner for your website so that people can just go right from, if they go to federaljack.com, my website, they can go to right on the side, they can just click on the banner and it'll bring them right to you, and they can purchase your books. And then that way when they hear this broadcast either live or in the archives later on or on YouTube or wherever, tune in and it's floating around there in cyberspace, and they'll hear it and they go, oh, okay, cool, I can just go right to Federal Jack, and by that time the banner will be up. In fact, by the time the interview airs, I'll have the banner up. So people can just go right, click on it, go right to your website, and then order your books. And ladies and gentlemen, like Fritz said, he has put his life on the line, so I have no problem supporting his work. I've referenced his stuff hundreds of times. I've played some audio from him, from audio clips on YouTube back in the past, but nothing beats actually having the man on the broadcast. And, I support him, so I urge you to as well. He's a good guy. He really sticks his neck out there, and he actually does. It's amazing. I don't think people realize how many interviews you do and how much time you spend actually sitting and chatting with people, Fritz. So, I urge everybody, support him. He does. This isn't like he doesn't have a paycheck from anybody coming in to do this for him. It's if he sells a book or whatever, that's his paycheck. So, support him. He does a lot of work. Fritz, do you have any speaking engagements planned again? Because I know back in the day you used to do them, and I'm sure that they were packed houses, and I can guarantee you that if you did like a speaking tour of some sort, you'd bring the house down, dude. You'd pack it out. I'm without a doubt, I'm sure you'd sell the house out.
My goal for this next year is to set up some speaking engagements around the country. I'm thinking of California, Seattle area, maybe a trip to the East Coast. So this is under consideration, and if anybody has the talent and the skill to put together a speaking engagement, feel free to network with me. I'm on Facebook, and also my email, I'll give that out real quickly. It's springmeier@hotmail.com. Just spell it like it sounds. And make sure you spell Springmeier correctly. And I have a Facebook presence. If somebody wants to become a friend on Facebook, you need to tell me why you want to become my friend, because lots of people request that. But, I'm not going to accept every stranger that comes along. So give me a heads up as to why you want to be my friend. And hopefully I can network with some of your listeners, and we'll have an ongoing relationship with your audience.
Yeah, and I urge everybody, if anybody wants to, check Fritz out. He's a real stand-up guy. He's, cool. And just, like he asked, when just follow the process that he asked, to friend request him on Facebook, if you do that or whatever, because like he said, he has to have some sort of filtration process. Believe me, I know it's that. A lot of times you get trolls too, and I'm sure, if I'm getting trolled, I can guarantee you Fritz Springmeier is getting trolled on Facebook. So, without a doubt, I'm sure that you are a target. You have you put yourself out there, Fritz, and you talk about a lot of stuff that people just are either afraid to talk about, or really, I find a lot of the stuff, the misinformation that's out there about this stuff, the bloodlines, mind control, all that. If it's misinformation, a lot of it, yes, has been put out. All you need is one person to put out some misinfo in the right area, right? Like leaving it out, almost like baiting a trap, like a salt lick. But the deer that come to that salt lick, the people that pick it up and run with it, I find it's pretty much out of ignorance because they don't know what they're talking about. And they've heard buzzwords like the Illuminati. That's why sometimes I try to figure out another way of saying, that's why, and I actually have to give credit where credit is due. A friend of mine named Mark Passio, who's a radio show host and an excellent researcher in his own right, just an amazing individual. He knows a lot about your work. Actually, he's used a lot of your work to help him in his research. And he came up with the term, the powers that shouldn't be. That's where I got it from. He's the one that originally exposed me to that. But I use it because I can't stand using the term Illuminati all the time. Because, again, like I said in the beginning, it brings up that image of tinfoil hattery or craziness. So I find people are more if you change certain phrases, try to take out certain key words, and then later on I'll explain once you get into the details of things, and I could say, okay, yes, they call themselves, I'm sure you've all heard of the Illuminati, and then people at that point they're a little more open and they're more receptive, as opposed to as soon as you say Illuminati, like right in the beginning, all of a sudden you can literally see that wall go up, and that mental wall goes poop, and that's it. You've already hit that first hurdle. So right. I try to get past that with little things like that. That's why I like to use the term the powers that shouldn't be. But the learning and understand the reality of the Illuminati, the real Illuminati, what they are, I think is really important because although it's got that the kooky conspiracy theory overtone that's been or label that's been put on it. People really need that this is something real. This is not a joke. This is not this is not some theory. It's conspiracy fact, if you want to call it anything. I mean, it is a conspiracy. It's obviously more than two people, plotting to do something. Fritz, do you see that the awakening of mankind?
It's interesting you asked that because while you were talking about using the term Illuminati, I was thinking about something that I participated in about a year ago. It was called a Gathering of Eagles. There were about 200 Christian prayer warriors that got together, and for a whole week they got down on their faces and asked God to forgive them. And then they spent an entire week praying against the Illuminati. And 20 years ago, you would not have had that many Christians using the word Illuminati all day long and praying against them. And here you had 200 prayer warriors actively praying against all the power structures and their agenda and everything in detail. It was amazing. So you see quite a growth in understanding. And so that was something pleasant, a pleasant surprise that waited me when I got out of prison, was to see the change there.
It is amazing. There is definitely an awakening going on, and hopefully we'll be able to turn the tide. I mean, I have faith. I try to be positive. I don't like to be one of these people that, there's no hope, the New World Order, blah, blah, blah. Yes, look, mankind's evolving. This is the way I look at it. Mankind is evolving. We can't stop that. We don't have a choice as to whether or not mankind evolves. Evolution is evolution. I look at it kind of like how Bill Cooper said, we're coming to a crossroads, and we either, go one way and that path is enlightenment, and we grow spiritually as humanity as a whole. We start to explore outer space, the oceans, everything else, stop blowing each other up over retarded things. Or we go the other direction into even more hardcore tyranny. And if we think things are bad now, we haven't seen anything yet. And that's, I think, the choice that humanity as a whole has coming. And that's one of the reasons that they keep us so bogged down in the ego, in base consciousness with TV and this mass media and the love of money and sex and girls dressing like whores and all this other stuff. They do that on purpose to keep you distracted and keep you focused, so that you're not even going to realize that your opportunity to make this choice is passing you by, and then you'll by default get stuck in Crapville for a second cycle until the universe or whatever decides to have another opportunity, another window to hop out of. That's really what I believe, and we have this choice. And I think that we have a chance to win this. And I hate to say that term, win. But you know what I mean, Fritz? I really have. I think we have a chance to turn the tide and actually make that turn down the evolution, or down that evolutionary path where mankind stops killing each other over dumb things, and we start to, we actually start to get along. What a novel idea, right? That we don't kill each other.
Yeah. If we really had a media that was a controlled media that was really for us, instead of pretending to be in favor of us, people would become aware of incredible discoveries out there, incredible inventions that are being suppressed. There are natural supplements. There are inventions that could make this planet everything that mankind would want. And they're there, and they're being suppressed. But I have seen these. I've seen some of them, and they're incredible. And so the potential for success for mankind is sitting right there. They use the expression, the keys to success. I don't think success has ever been locked up. It's just that we need to reach out and grab it as humanity. So these things are being kept from us because we're being distracted with all this crap that the world system is what are they distracting people with? Professional wrestling, football, basketball, and then the 6 o'clock news, which is propaganda, or you name it. I don't need to tell everybody what they're being distracted with, and they know for themselves. So while they're being distracted, all of these incredible things that could help us are going by the wayside.
I agree. And if people just paid attention, it's amazing when people start to pay attention and they realize their true power, and they realize, their potential. I know some people took an anti-consumerism message from it, but there's a clip from the movie Fight Club where the character Tyler Durden, Brad Pitt's character, which interestingly enough is an alter personality from the main character's personality. He had a split personality, but he makes a point in the movie that I thought was interesting, and I took more of than just an anti-consumerism message away from it. He talks about how TV has you running around chasing things that you really don't need. So you're working a job that you hate, so you can spend money that you work a job that you hate to be able to go out and spend money that you really don't have anyway because it's on credit on things that you really don't need to impress people that you really don't even like anyway. and it's a little more, he goes into more detail a little bit, but that's the basic gist of it.
I see all this potential, and I see it squandered. God damn it, an entire generation pumping gas, waiting tables, slaves with white collars. Advertising has us chasing cars and clothes, working jobs we hate so we can buy shit we don't need. We're the middle children of history, man. No purpose or place. We have no Great War, no Great Depression. Our Great War is a spiritual war. Our Great Depression is our lives. We've all been raised on television to believe that one day we'd all be millionaires and movie gods and rock stars, but we won't. We're slowly learning that fact. And we're very, very pissed off.
It's really interesting because when you look at it and you realize that, wow, he's right. This mind control device just has people literally control, and it's not, you can't blame the TV. It's just a method of control, which, by the way, I find if you take, I've taken some of your, like just as an example, I give out a bunch of DVDs, but I took one of your Prophecy Club speeches from YouTube and I made 100 copies of it on DVD and I gave it out to people that were more interested in learning about the Illuminati, and I was like, here, check this guy out. So, and this was years ago. And I find that when people would watch it on their television set, and I would tell them, just go home and throw it on your TV and watch it. And because I had done this to myself, if you unplug the cable, right, and now you've unplugged the propaganda, well, you still have that programming in your head. So if people, and people can say what they want, but you can kind of deprogram yourself by using their same tools to give yourself the information the information about what's really going on. And I mean, I don't mean just run out and buy any guy's movie or whatever, or just chase down whoever. I mean, you have to make sure the person that you're getting a DVD from or is respected, or a well-researched individual. You want to make sure it's not disinfo, because there is that stuff out there. There's always that chance that you could come across that. But there are some really good, well-researched individuals who put together some amazing documentaries. If you get them, or if you get a chance to. Now people have these huge flat screen televisions with Google TV and everything. Well, use that stuff to your advantage. If you have a YouTube thing on your TV channel, on your your smart television or whatever, look up Fritz Springmeier. Watch one of his older Prophecy Club speeches when he was talking about all the same things we're talking about today, and use that tool, that mind control device, to help deprogram your noodle. I mean, there is ways that you can use some of their tools against them. I find that's one way. Airing things via public access. There's a lot of amazing public access channels out there that are run by, whoever, local people that are awake and aware, and they air. I've seen them air David Icke speeches. I've seen them air, things of that magnitude. So, I mean, if you can accept that, you're more higher level up. You know what I mean? If you can accept a lot of the because he goes into detail. He even, a lot of people reference your work, Fritz, by the way. I don't know if you realize that, but there's a lot of people, a lot of well-respected researchers out there, today's researchers or whatever, people in the light today, that your work into the bloodlines and the levels of mind control and stuff. You've been a really big influence and a big part of that. And I want to make sure the listeners understand. If I didn't convey this in the beginning, Fritz is, at least in my opinion, you call him a legend in the conspiracy, research circles or whatever. And he is one of the most well-researched individuals I've ever had the pleasure of interviewing on the subject of the occult and mind control.
What's humorous about this, Federal Jack, is that they thought that they were getting rid of me. They shoved me off and caged me like an animal for 8 years. And while I was away, incapable of interacting with the world, this incredible expansion of my work went on its own. And the books that I have written belong to the world. They're out of my hands. And the material just blossomed because of people like you. You know, you made these 100 DVDs and passed them out. And other people were doing the same thing. So while they thought that they had gotten rid of me in prison, the work continued. It's hilarious.
Yep, because you can't stop an idea. And once you've pulled the curtain aside and shown people the reality of the situation, it's like I said earlier, and I use this reference quite often on my broadcast. The way I look at it is like when in The Matrix, the best visual I could give people is the end of the first Matrix movie when Neo, he gets shot and then he stands back up, and Agent Smith and the other two guys are at the end of the hallway, and they turn around and they shoot at him, and he's looking at them and he sees nothing but green code. You know, he sees everything in digital code. Uh-huh. That's what happens when you come to this your level of enlightenment. And once you start to see that, you can't stop that. They can't reverse that. And you helped wake a lot of people up. And then once people saw them put you in prison, they were like, wow, this guy really obviously must have said something that pissed them off, or else he wouldn't have gone to prison. See, they gave you more street cred is what they did, Fritz.
Yeah.
Right off the bat. And they anything that you had said up to that point, and then obviously anything that you might bring forward after that dovetails into the original stuff that you worked on, right? Anything that you said up to that point was instantly verified. Bam, instantly. It doesn't matter. You could have said the moon was made of green cheese and 6-foot rats lived on it, and it would not matter. It would have verified it right then and there, because of the way that they reacted to your information and how they reacted to you disseminating this information. So that as soon as they put a target on you, people realized, wow, this guy, obviously he's saying something, we have to take more seriously. And dude, I have to honestly tell you, when I first found your work, I knew a little bit about the Illuminati, but you were one of the people that helped wake me up to the deeper levels and pushed me to research it even further and go where I've gone with it. And
great,
Fritz, I have to say, you really have inspired a lot of people. I would love to pick your brain a little bit about Kathy O'Brien and Mark Phillips.
When it comes to Mark Phillips and Kathy O'Brien, and as you know, they've married. I've met them on a number of occasions, and Kathy O'Brien is a programmed multiple. They call that what used to be called MPD, they call it DID now, dissociative identity disorder. Kathy was a presidential model, and her story is consistent with the research that I have done over the years. Her story is consistent with the program multiples that I have worked with. Mark and I come from things from a totally different perspective. Mark comes from his background of working in the government. I come from my perspective as being a Christian, and so our approaches are different, but I do think that Kathy O'Brien, her story is important to get out, because you're getting an eyewitness testimony of how sick things have become. And there have been many, many people in the system that have come to me and talked to me and thanked me for the work that I've done, because they had to be involved in the kinds of things that Kathy O'Brien was involved with. And one, they were glad to have these things exposed, but they were also glad that I helped them understand their own lives, because a lot of these people are kind of, they're under the mind control themselves, or under deception, or are limited in their view of things, and weren't able to see the whole picture until they could get a hold of my information. Kathy O'Brien, her material is going to be controversial, and she's not the only eyewitness, but Mark and Kathy have been witnesses to this kind of thing in a special way. He's traveled around the world, and so I think that it's worthwhile to pay attention to what Kathy's saying and to her story, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, her story is incredible, and it shows you how it's one example on the small level of the things that they do to control a human being on an individual basis, and then there's also examples of mind control on a mass populace level. But what they do to these people on an individual basis is incredible. And she names some very interesting names, which there's certain people who she names that people kind of, I guess you could say, idolize, and they certain former politicians that she says that were involved and know about this, and that they're kind of almost now they're trying to formulate a second career as some sort of like liberty-minded politician or whatever. Where I'm going with this is it's amazing the amount of people that are involved and have knowledge of the reality of things, what's going on. And ladies and gentlemen, if you want to know the full story about what I was just referencing, rather than spoil the book, and I'm not trying, not that it's a fake fabricated story, but rather than take anything away from Kathy's book or her work and her coming forward, I would just urge you to just go get the book yourself and read it, and you'll understand exactly who I'm talking about. And I've mentioned this person, his name, on air before, and I'll leave it at that. That way, it kind of makes you want to go read her book. But you'll know exactly who I'm talking about. All I'll say is he worked at their little school that they had for the presidential models. And if you've read her book, you'll know who I'm talking about. And he's trying to make a second career as a hero. And when you go read the book, you'll see what I'm talking about. And if it was defamatory in any way, then he would have sued her, right? If it was
right.
If it was not true in any way, shape, or form, he would have had grounds to sue her. But if he didn't sue her, that means that he didn't want to bring it up publicly in court. Gee, I wonder why. So go read her book, ladies and gentlemen. Fritz, I know the levels that this stuff goes to, and the presidential model thing is just amazing. And she brings up, another thing she brings up, and I say this all the time, and I didn't even realize this. Again, we all learn something new every day, right? When I read Kathy's book, and I saw the thing about country music and the country music industry, and I was like, oh my God, it makes total sense. When she explained how people, the models were controlled and stuff like that, and how some of these entertainers are controlled, and then she started to list names, and then I went back, and some of these names that were listed, in fact, I think it was Tammy Wynette was one of them. She, if I remember correctly, she went back and did a song back in the 90s with a band out of England, this trance whatever band, and the videos are packed with Illuminati symbolism, and the band's logo was a pyramid with I think it was either a tape or a boombox or something where the all-seeing eye would be. But it was, they were all wearing robes in the video. It's just full of Illuminati symbolism. But it was interesting because I was, when I read the book and she mentioned some of these names in the country music industry, Tammy Wynette was came up, and I went and I looked and I was like, oh my God. And I started to realize wow, it does connect. Like once you understand how the music industry works and things like that, and you see how it dovetails one thing after another. And by the way, that brings up one other question. You would probably be one of the only people, I guess, I could ask this to, that I could think that could answer this honestly and unbiasedly. John Todd, I know you've spoken at the Prophecy Club. I'm sure you've heard of who John Todd was, right? The guy that the former music Illuminati insider. Do you think that he is legitimate with when he comes out and says, yes, I'm a former insider, and the stuff that he brings forward, or do you think he's disinfo? Because I've seen people say, oh, he's a liar, he's disinfo, but the stuff that he comes out with, I mean, if it's true, it's pretty shocking, but it does dovetail with everything that we've been discussing.
John Todd is deceased. He died in a special prison that they have for sexual offenders. He died 2-3 years ago. Don't quote me on the exact date. I don't have it at the top of my head. But during the 1980s, John Todd had gone around and given talks exposing the Illuminati, talking about how he was an insider. And I didn't meet him personally, but I listened to these tapes after I had done thousands of hours of research. And when I listened to him, I go, this man knows what he's talking about, because you can tell if somebody knows what they're talking about or not. Now, you have to understand that John Todd was a program multiple. So he got very confused about basic facts, like at one time he would be saying his parents are so-and-so, and another time he would say his parents were these other people. You know, a normal person doesn't get confused as to who their parents are. Well, that was because he was a program multiple. And so you have to factor that in, that at times he got confused or said contradictory things. You have to learn how to sift through what a program multiple says, because some of it may be programming, some of it may be things that they were deceived into learning. They're going to get the story garbled. But overall, I could tell that he had been involved. And in fact, the fact that he did get mixed up and act like a program multiple was further proof to me that the man had been an Illuminati member. And he spoke about the Collins family, which happened to be one of the families that I had firsthand knowledge was an Illuminati family. So I got in contact with them after they had put him in prison, and I sent him money for his books, and I sent him clothes, and we had conversations on the phone. But at some point, our telephonic relationship ended, and that's when they took him and they retried him, and they gave him basically a life sentence, claimed that he had done all of these, that he had sexually molested all of these little girls, and they put him into a special prison for sexual offenders. And then eventually he ended up dying in there. So that's John Todd's story. His tapes continue to live on longer than he has. Again, like my work, you can put somebody in prison, but the work that he did and the work that I did continues, has a life of its own. So yes, he was someone who was in the Illuminati. But like all of these people, you have to realize that they may be confused about some issues. They may not be 100% correct on everything, but cut them some slack. They've been through a lot.
See, that's even mind-blowing information to me about the fact that he was a multiple. I've actually played his audio on my radio broadcast before, and I believe that he is accurate, but I wanted to get your take on it, and that was just, I didn't even realize that he was a mind-controlled multiple. Do you, obviously you've heard him, the things he said, when he talked about how, I think it was David Crosby or whatever he was chatting to, and he had asked them, are they still all witches, and do you have to be in a coven to be able to actually get a music contract or anything? What was he actually referring to? I guess he was calling them witches, but would you say that's the Satanism aspect, that like that's the part of the coven, you have to make this deal with them or become part of that? Was that what he was referencing, or is that actually a whole different aspect of is there more to, is there even something else that people in Hollywood, because I know the entertainment industry, I know that goes back to and the term Hollywood, that actually goes back to ancient cults and all this other stuff. It's crazy when you start to research some of this stuff, but I wonder, I just wonder if when he was referencing that they, David Crosby said to him that you had to be a witch or part of a coven or whatever. I wonder, now when you hear, I know that was back in like the 70s, I think, when this one piece of audio I played was from. Now when you look back on it now with the research I've done about, the Satanism and stuff, I wonder if that's, the same thing that he was referencing, that you had to partake in part of this, some of these rituals or whatever, and be part of this coven, and then your career takes off or whatever, because now you're in the group, as it were.
That's correct. That's true. As I understand your question, yes, in general, people are expected to dirty themselves by becoming part of the group, the Luciferian covens, and they have they can pull the strings to make things happen. That's why you see a lot of people with exceptional talent that never make it big. And then some of these people that make it big, you're like shaking your head. This person isn't even talented. How are they being made into an icon? So yes, they do join Luciferian covens. The main underground coven in Hollywood has several hundred people in it, and it's physically underground. They have facilities that are physically underground for their rituals. So that's that. He was correct on that.
And just incredible information. And then one last quick question, and then I'll let you go, Fritz, because I know it's been well over a 2-hour interview. Just an amazing interview, by the way. Ted Gunderson talked about like the McMartin School and how it was connected to like satanic ritual abuse and stuff. And then I remember in the I think it was the late 90s, the FBI came out and said satanic ritual abuse was fake, didn't exist. And then the false memory Foundation and all that stuff came out. From my research, I mean, every time I even if I research, the Satanism and the mind control aspect from another angle, a lot of times it leads back to stories that either dovetail into the McMartin School incident or sound just like the testimony of those children. So I have a hard time believing that, when some people say, oh, that's not true, that's fake. I have a hard time believing that, because there's more than enough research to say that there was something going on there. Are you familiar with the case at all?
Yes, I am. It's just one example of what's going on across this country in thousands of places. I was a West Point cadet for 2 years. A little bit shorter than 2 years. I resigned before I had a commitment. And we had a scandal there at West Point where they discovered something similar to the McMartin case was going on. So this thing is widespread. It's going on some of the military bases. There's been people that were in the military that have discussed some of these things with me. And then also in preschools and other places. This is part of the answer to people's question, well, how could something this be this extensive? How could it be going on this widespread? Well, because it's being done in our schools and it's being done in our daycare centers. It's being done all around us. This is just one example of what's going on around us. The McMartin case is just one example.
Yeah, and it's incredible, and I know it's tough for people to take in, but then when you look at Penn State and Jerry Sandusky, and then you look at things like, and now they're coming out with Jimmy Savile over in England. I made this interesting point the other day. This is just something that with those two cases really quick that in the last few minutes here that pops out at me. Both of those guys were the procurers of the children. They weren't like the top level pedophiles in this pedophile ring. They were just the dirtbag pedophile that got the kids for the other scumbag pedophiles. But they really never went after the people that were buying the children. They went after the guy that got the kids, but they're not going after the people in the ring itself. And to me, that shows that it's almost like they're cleaning house and they're getting rid of old ties to these older people that have been involved in this game for a long period of time, and it's this younger blood, and it's almost, I don't want to say a hostile takeover, but they realize there's just too many loose ends out there that could lead to them and cause them a problem, so they're just going to shed all ties.
And by throwing us a bone, it looks like the news media is trying to protect us by exposing this stuff. But like you say, their exposure is very limited. They only go so far, and then anything beyond a certain point, they begin covering it up.
Yep, and then you'll never hear about certain things. I was actually impressed to hear the media. Of course, they're only going to go into it to a certain degree, but there was a reporter from one of the local channels in the area in the UK, and or it might have even been over in Scotland. I don't remember which one of the two it was, but it was discussing one of these pedophile rings, and it's all connected over there. So one of it was a local retired, I think he was the assistant, like the second in command in the police force, and he was retired, and there was a local politician, and the two of them started discussing on the news, on air, how the one guy, the former cop, is like, well, there's an interesting connection, how they're all Freemasons. He's like, so I'm not trying to say that, all Freemasons are bad or anything, but it is a connection that should be checked into, that almost every one of these guys that had not been investigated were Freemasons. And and it's like the guy a lot, and then you look, well, who would have done the investigations? Well, certain officers or certain detectives would have done it. Yeah, and is that detective a Freemason? Yes, he is. Oh, isn't that interesting? You don't think there's anything going on there? So I was impressed. And I'm sure that they left it at that, and they cut it off, and they probably didn't go any further, because the clip that I saw, the lady ended the interview, but she even asked him, she said, do you really think that the Freemasons are like an issue in this at all? And that's when he said, I really think they do need to be investigated. It is if you're doing an honest investigation and you're doing any sort of real research into this, one must look at it and say, that's a little odd that all of these guys that were not investigated for child, whatever you want to call it, pedophilia, child rape, that's really what it should be called. No, we shouldn't put a nice, sounding name on it. It should be shocking and vile. That way people understand how disgusting it is. But they either partook in it or they covered it up, and they're all Freemasons. So, and I'm not saying that
Exactly.
the Freemasons themselves all love to do it, but it shows you how these secret societies take care of one another and they cover things up, and you'll never hear about it. I was just surprised to hear the news media even cover it at all. So it's interesting to be able to pick your brain on this stuff, Fritz, because like I said, you're so plugged in, you're so in tune. It's amazing. You really are an amazing individual, sir. It's an honor to be able to talk to you and pick your brain.
It's been a real privilege to be on here. I've really enjoyed it, Federal Jack. And
anytime you ever want to come back on my broadcast, Fritz, you let me know, and you are more than welcome. I want you to plug all your stuff again. Go ahead and plug whatever. If you, your website, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, whatever you have, go ahead and plug away.
Well, the main thing is to let people know where they can get access to my books. Pentracks.com. pentracks.com. And, we talked about Kathy O'Brien's book, Transformation of America. And she approaches it from the standpoint of, this is my sordid story. I got raped here. I got programmed here. I got abused here. And it can be a little hard to digest one horrible story after another. My material comes from a totally different angle. My material sort of is approaching it from this angle. Let's say you were talking to somebody who had limited knowledge and they said, I don't believe that planes exist. And so you say, okay, I'm going to show you a diagram of every piece that makes up a 747. And I'm going to tell you how each of those pieces is made. And then I'm going to show you that the people that make these planes want to make planes, and they have where their factories are. And when you break down the totality of it all, then it becomes hard to escape the reality of this mind control. And so that's the way my books are. They're large. The formula book's 500 pages. Its sequel, Deeper Insights, is 600 pages. And they cover all of the details from A to Z, 40 pages of programming codes. When you see all of the little details, you'll as I lay them out, then the reader will start seeing all this stuff for himself all around him. And so that's what I would plug, is I would strongly encourage people to get that information on the mind control, because that's how they're able to get so much done behind our backs, and the world will never look the same.
Yeah, the world will never look the same, and you'll never look at any of this programming, brainwashing garbage the same way again. I can't even watch. I don't have cable or anything. I turned it off. But I can't even be in public, like if we go to a diner or something and they have TV on there and the news is on. I can't sit anywhere near the television, or I have to ask them to mute it because I start yelling at the TV because I know it's lies, and it's in me. And it's not like I'm a crazy man, like I just start babbling, but I'm just like, yeah, okay, how about this? And I start rattling off facts, and my wife just like face palms it. She's like, oh God, not again. So I stay away from it because I can't. I would have family that would watch that stuff. I would be in the same room, Fritz, and I would lose it. Fox News in particular. And I don't like any of them. I don't like CNN or MSNBC. I know they're all garbage, but Fox News in particular drove me up a wall.
What amazed me one time is, after the thousands and thousands of hours of research and the books I've written, somebody who I knew real well, who was an engineer, he confronted me because he's so sucked in with whatever the system says. He said, Fritz, where's your proof of all this? And I go, whoa. You sit in front of the television every night and soak up what they tell you on the 6 o'clock news. Do you ever shout at the television when you're listening to the news, where's your proof of this? I have written these vast books, come up with all kinds of documentation, and you're approaching me like this, but you don't approach the television that way.
Right? Like, people don't attack, if you say, oh, 9/11 was an inside job, oh, you're a heretic, how dare you, heresy, hellfire and brimstone rain down upon you. But when the media tells you that, you're a bad individual, or, it's your fault, the economy is effed up because of you, you need your flu shot, people are getting sick because you didn't get your flu shot, it's all you. When someone's pretty much urinating all over you, that's acceptable. You don't put up a fight over that. But if I bring you real information, that scares you to the point where you don't want to. I've seen people get so emotionally attached to disinformation. The stuff, the mind control, the propaganda, that they physically get agitated. I mean, I've had people throw DVDs at me, Fritz. I had a guy tell me, "You're not a real veteran. Real veterans would never do this," and I'm like, "Really?" I took an oath to defend the people of this country and the Constitution. I didn't take an oath to defend some scumbag corporation the last time I checked. More often than not, it's positive than negative, But there are times where people, you know what I mean? I mean, you especially, sure. I'm sure, over the years, and you were doing this back in the 90s, man. It is just so incredible. It really, back then, it was so hard. I remember back then, and the internet was in its super infancy compared to what it is now. People couldn't just go look up as easily as they can now the information, like on YouTube or whatever. And it's just really incredible because you were. Fritz, you were putting your neck on the line. you were going out and literally that was when the speaking engagements were where you got probably the most. The most, I guess, views from, at one time, and then that would lead to, doing exactly like what you said when you went to jail. They, when they imprisoned you and locked you up for, what was it, 8 years? While you were locked up, your information just kept going all throughout the internet and all throughout the world. It's amazing. When I had found out, in fact, I didn't realize that you were locked up until. You were probably maybe halfway, maybe a little more than halfway through your stint there, and I had no idea. And when I realized that, again, just like I said earlier, as soon as I realized that they locked you up, I was like, wow, this guy must have had, wow, whose cornflakes did he piss in? Because obviously he hit a nerve somewhere. So, and then that really, because I had seen some of your work before, and I had seen a lot of, I had done research on mind control, but it was very synchronistic because this was just around the time that I was starting to research mind control a lot deeper and start to get into detail about the things that they do and all this other stuff, and it was just very synchronistic, and I was like, wow, they put him in jail. And then when I had talked about you on air, I said, I think he's in jail. And then when you got out, I was like, woohoo, Fritz Springmeier's out of jail. So, I'm glad that you're at least right now you're back with us, and you're a little safer than you were. And I'm glad that you're still able to, be interviewed and give out this type of information, and just be able to have a conversation with you is amazing, Fritz, because, I could sit here for another 6 hours and pick your brain if I had the time. You're just an incredible man. I'm going to have you back on the broadcast. Well, I'll reschedule you. I'll give you, some time. We'll do it like in a month or so, and I'll have you back on. And I'm going to introduce you to my friend Mark Passio, who I know he would love to be able to chat with you. And, maybe that'd be cool if you could go speak at the Free Your Mind conference. That'd be amazing. So, any closing thoughts, Fritz?
I just encourage people to love life. And, one of the things that I feel called to do is call people to noble deeds. That's my goal in life, is to call people to do noble deeds, not minor little deeds like helping a little woman across the street, but I'm talking about major noble deeds that are the equivalent of like climbing Mount Everest, and where you put put a lot of time and effort and energy into doing this. And anybody can do a noble deed. It doesn't matter what your theological beliefs are, but call people to do noble deeds, call people to realize that as long as we don't give up on things, the battle isn't lost. The battle's only lost when we throw in the towel, and to have a positive attitude and to make the most of your life, make good decisions, go back and ask yourself, why am I doing what I'm doing? And then do what will fulfill your life and make your life, redeem the time is what the way the Word of God says. So just encourage the listeners to redeem the time. That's probably more valuable than anything else that you have is time. You know, they say money is time. No, it's time is money. It's the other way around. Time is more important. So use your life, use it to benefit the rest of humanity, and use it to enjoy life. And I guess that would be my final bottom line to communicate with the listeners at this point.
Thank you so much, Fritz, for coming on and doing, maybe 2 minutes shy of a 3-hour interview with me. Just amazing, sir. You are an amazing individual, and you are a wealth of information. Ladies and gentlemen, you need to go to his website. And again, I will have a link up on federaljack.com. But you need to go to his website, and you need to purchase all of his books in physical format, and that way you have them and they're referenced too. Because just because you read a book doesn't mean, oh, I'm done with it, I throw it out, or I use it as a balancing object for my table because one of the table legs is shorter than the other. You don't do stupid things like that. The book is a reference point. Later on, you'll be talking to somebody, whatever, maybe doing an interview or getting ready for an interview, right? And you say, I want to talk about this, but man, I don't quite remember the details. Oh, but I have Fritz Springmeier's book. Let me go to the chapter on, let's see, whatever. And mind control, okay, blah. And you go and you look. I mean, that's the whole point of having these books, so that, 10, 20 years later, you can still reference these things and say, see, here's the evidence. Because people are always going to say, show me the proof. Show me the proof, because nobody ever wants to go do the research themselves. They always want everything handed to them in a silver platter. If you're going to fight that mindset, then you need to have the ammo to win the info war. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in. Fritz, you are a gentleman and a scholar, sir, and it has been an honor to be able to sit with you and chat with you tonight, and I'm going to have you on the broadcast sooner rather than later.
Thank you, Federal Jack. It's been my privilege. Good night to all the listeners. Thank you.